The expectations for Victor Wembanyama coming into the season were out of control. People were talking about him being a top 10 player in the league as just a second-year guy. And frankly, he hasn't been that. He hasn't been close to that to begin the season, especially on the offensive end of the floor. And there's one main reason. There's one gigantic issue for him that has been an issue for players of a similar archetype as him in the past. Teams are not treating Victor Wembanyama like he's a big guy. If you watch this most recent game against Oklahoma City and some of their other matchups as well, you'll notice who's guarding Wemby. It's not on a switch. It's not in a scramble situation. Their intentional matchup for Victor Wembanyama is Alex Caruso or Dylan Brooks. And this is something that we have seen in the past. I think most famously, Marcus Smart used to be a guy that would guard bigs in the post a lot. This was a problem for someone like Kristaps Porzingis in the past, like Karl Anthony Towns in the past. These finesse bigs, these perimeter skilled bigs, and in Porzingis' case, these skinnier bigs that don't have real legitimate post skills are being guarded by wings and having a big issue with it. And with San Antonio's personnel specifically, that allows teams to put their big on someone like Jeremy Sochan and have that rim protection as well if Wemby is able to get towards the rim to even make it that much more difficult for him. Guarding him with a wing allows them to stay in front, to really bother him, to use that lower body strength that these wings have, these Carusos, these Dylan Brooks have. And even if he's able to get around that, then there's a legitimate center five-man waiting for him at the rim. And if you go back to last season, the move from the 4 to the 5, taking Zach Collins off the floor and putting Victor Wembanyama at the 5 full time, really skyrocketed his offensive output. He was hitting a lot more threes. He was getting a lot more easy shots. And right now, that's kind of backfiring on San Antonio because a lot of Wemby's attempts are just jump shots. They're inefficient shots. He's not shooting well from three the way that he did down the stretch last year, and he just doesn't look like a very good offensive player. Now, granted, defensively, the impact is still out of control. There's a ton of possessions where just his presence at the rim, his length, is deterring teams from getting good shots at the rim. He's still awesome defensively, and he's going to figure it out offensively. But for this season, for right now, this is very concerning that teams feel so non-threatened about Wemby in the post or in the mid post that they're totally fine putting 6'4", 6'5" guys on him in the post. And this has just been an evolution that we've seen in the NBA over the last decade or so. When teams started to go small, it was basically impossible for teams to guard without also going small. They felt like if they had their big out there, they were just giving up all of these open threes when teams would put wings at the 5, when they would go super small. But we've kind of started to go in the opposite direction. We've got bigs once again dominating in the post against these smaller matchups. We're kind of swinging back to the other side with Jokic and Embiid. Even role player guys like Zach Edey are finding significant roles offensively because teams were starting to play so small. But with these kinds of matchups specifically, Wemby's just not capable right now, physically or skill set wise, of punishing those kinds of mismatches. He can't back down Alex Caruso or Dylan Brooks in the post and get an easy bucket. And so the fact that they're able to guard him with a wing and then put a big at the rim, the big that's guarding Jeremy Sochan, is just completely messing up everything that he would ever do offensively towards the end of last year. And the thing that is making this that much bigger of an issue is that Wemby just isn't making shots right now. Because, for example, Kristaps Porzingis, who I mentioned earlier, used to deal with this all the time. Yet in his last season in Washington and then last season with Boston, he was really good in the post. His advanced numbers on post-ups, especially against mismatches, were awesome. He figured out how to score on smaller defenders in the post, and he would just turn and face and shoot over them. He would get the ball at the nail. He would get the ball at the elbow. He would be able to punish those mismatches by just shooting over them and making every jump shot that he looked at. And so teams realized, okay, we can't do this anymore. We can't put smaller guys on KP because we're just bleeding points. Wemby's not there right now. He's not making those 12-footers. He's not making those 18-footers. He's not making threes over smaller guys. And until he figures out either how to get to the rim and finish efficiently or make those jump shots over smaller guys, teams are going to continue to guard him like this, and it limits everything San Antonio can do offensively every time down the floor because they feel like they have to get on the ball. Like if you have a 7'5" guy being guarded by Alex Caruso, you're looking to give him the ball. You're like, okay, this is fantastic. This is a mismatch. Right now, Alex Caruso, Dylan Brooks, Marcus Smart, eventually those guys guarding Victor Wembanyama is not a mismatch. And at this point, I think it's important to remind everyone that this is a year 2 player. And despite what our expectations may have been for him coming into the season, there's still a lot of room for growth and improvement. This is a guy that's still super young, still trying to figure it out. And this is something that I talked about even before his rookie year last year, that offensively, without the jump shot really developing and being a huge part of his game, we were probably over projecting where he was going to be from a scoring perspective, especially on these kind of mid-post ISOs and having the ball every single time down the floor and trying to create against what we thought would be mismatches. The expectations there were way too high. Defensively, yes, all that impact is going to be there, but I think that we are ahead in our brains of where Wemby is offensively because occasionally he has a nice dribble move or occasionally he hits a jump shot. It's not like he's on the skill level right now, consistency-wise, of someone like Kristaps Porzingis offensively, and he shouldn't be because Kristaps Porzingis has been in the league for a while and Wemby just showed up. He's going to get better at this kind of stuff, and I think it's going to come from being a better jump shooter, being a more consistent jump shooter like KP became. I think it's going to come from someone like Chet even is able to deal with this by having some off the dribble skills, having a tighter handle at this point than Wemby, being able to get to the rim and use his size at the rim against some of these smaller guys. But also OKC's personnel is just better for this because they have all this floor spacing on the floor. I think that's going to be an adjustment for San Antonio to potentially look at. Is as good as Sochan has been actually to begin the year, him and Chris Paul have this nice chemistry. I think they might try some lineups with Wemby where there is more floor spacing around him. They have a shooting big out there that isn't Jeremy Sochan alongside Victor Wembanyama, so that big can't just be standing at the rim. Because right now, every team in the league knows Sochan's not a threat from three. And so when those guys are out there together, the big is just standing at the rim waiting for Wemby to get by the wing, and then they can challenge Wemby at the rim. Everything about what they're doing offensively, or defensively, I should say, is centered around Victor Wembanyama. And I think at this point, it's just too much to ask of him this early on in year two to carry a team that, other than him offensively, doesn't have a lot going on. You're talking about Sochan, Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes, Keldon Johnson. Until Devin Vassell comes back and gives them more shooting and gives them someone that can work off these screens and create a little bit of offense for them, they're just going to be so reliant on Victor Wembanyama in the mid-post, in these post-ups, and it's just not efficient offense. And other than that, they can go to some ball screen stuff, pick and roll, pick and pop, and some of that stuff is there, but teams are getting better about keeping him away from the rim on these lob attempts, and on the pick and pops, he's just not shooting well. And that, I think, is the biggest part of this. This trend of guarding him with a smaller guy wouldn't be either as effective or it wouldn't be as big of a deal if he was making jump shots. And he came into the league as this guy that we thought would have a really high ceiling as a jump shooter, and it just hasn't happened so far this season. But it was like this to begin the year last year as well. His early season shooting splits were not very good from three. It was totally normal to expect that he wasn't going to shoot that well as he got adjusted to the physicality of the game. And I think we just assumed that all that stuff would improve to begin this season. But as the year goes on, San Antonio will get more creative about how to kind of unleash him in these mismatches. Maybe they'll look to get him the ball in the middle of the floor more often so that teams aren't doubling, so that he has more options. Again, adding more floor spacing I think would be super helpful as well, even though Sochan has been playing really, really well. And also, he's just going to make more shots. He's too talented of a player to be held down offensively by 6'4" guys. But this is going to be something I'm watching for the entire rest of the season. Does he get flustered by this? Does he get frustrated? Does he think, man, I don't know why I can't understand this. It's breaking my brain why I can't score against guys that are so much smaller than me in the post. Is he going to be able to figure that out? Is that going to be something he's going to be able to solve? I'm looking forward to seeing that happens.